Airports, the great equalizers. Everyone, no matter their status, boards the same planes, undergoes the same security checks, and faces the same long lines. Or do they? Airports are a place where everyone seems equal, but underneath the surface, subtle differences still exist. Today, we meet Marcus, a seasoned traveler here in the airport. Marcus, a black man in his mid-40s, body well built, standing tall and calm. He's well dressed, carrying a carry-on, his expression calm and confident. He approaches the check-in desk, but the attendant barely acknowledges him. Kathy, the flight attendant on that desk, brushing him off, says, "Economy check-in is over there, sir." Marcus, holding up his ticket, "Actually, I'm flying first class today." In that moment, a small but telling assumption had been made. A man like Marcus doesn't belong in first class, at least, that's what the world around him seemed to say. Kathy, polite but distant, "I'm sorry, sir, this is first class, economy check-in is over there." Marcus, who is confident, but slightly taken aback, "This is my boarding pass." "First class," he repeated. Marcus then handed his first-class boarding pass to the flight attendant. Written all over the attendant's face, a slight flicker of doubt crossing her features as she glances at Marcus, then back at the ticket. The attendant looks at the ticket again, then reluctantly gestures for Marcus to proceed as she concludes with him. Marcus now checked and walks towards the security checks queue. Marcus stood patiently in line, his boarding pass and identification already in hand, ready to proceed through security. As he approached the checkpoint, he noticed the security officer, a middle-aged white man with a stern expression, glance up at him. The officer's eyes scanned Marcus's body, lingering on his athletic build and broad shoulders. "Sir, can you step aside for an additional check?" the officer barked, his tone abrupt and commanding. Marcus felt a surge of frustration but remained calm, accustomed to such encounters. He politely complied, stepping aside as instructed. A nearby passenger, a white woman, shot him a sympathetic glance. The security officer, whose name tag read Officer Johnson, began to scrutinize Marcus's travel documents and ID. Marcus noticed Officer Johnson's eyes darting between his photo and face, as if searching for discrepancies. "Can you tell me the purpose of your travel, sir?" Officer Johnson asked gruffly. Marcus explained that he was heading to a business conference, providing details about the event and his company. Officer Johnson listened intently, his expression unyielding. Meanwhile, a second security officer, a woman of Asian descent, approached. "Is there an issue here?" she asked Officer Johnson quietly. "No, just routine additional screening," Officer Johnson replied curtly. The female officer nodded and turned to Marcus. "Sorry for the inconvenience, sir. May I assist with the additional screening?" Marcus complies without a fuss, though he knows this is a pattern. He's often singled out despite following all the rules. Other passengers, who are not black, pass through without additional screenings. Marcus appreciated her polite demeanor and nodded. The female officer efficiently conducted the secondary screening, which yielded nothing out of the ordinary. As Marcus collected his belongings, Officer Johnson handed him his documents. "You're clear to proceed, sir." Marcus smiled wryly, aware that his profile, a black male with a well-built physique, had likely triggered the additional scrutiny. He made a mental note to report the incident, hoping to contribute to ongoing efforts to address racial profiling in airport security. With his dignity intact, Marcus proceeded to his gate, reflecting on the encounter. He had these internal reflections within himself as he sees other passengers treated with more ease. He wondered how many others, like him, had faced similar experiences and vowed to continue advocating for fairness and equality in all aspects of life. Some gates are now opened, including Gate E2, which is indicated on Marcus's boarding pass, and the flight boarding was completed with no much challenges. When Marcus finally gets on the plane, he walks toward the first-class cabin. There is a subtle contrast in comparing his treatment with that of a white passenger ahead of him, pampered, greeted warmly by the flight crew, offered a glass of champagne before they even sit down. Marcus is barely acknowledged as he takes his seat. Kim, flight attendant in the plane, said curtly, "Seat 1A is over there." Marcus responded, "Thanks, I'll take a glass of water, please." Kim, who seemed disinterested, said, "Sure, I'll bring it." From the moment we step onto a plane, assumptions take flight. But for some, those assumptions are far heavier than the carry-ons we bring aboard. Marcus is seated, looking out the window. A flight attendant approaches the row ahead of him, warmly offering pillows and blankets to passengers. That is Kim, speaking brightly to other passengers. She asked, "Anything else I can get you, sir? Some sparkling water? Champagne?" The same flight attendant approaches Marcus, but with a very different tone. Kim, now turning to Mr. Marcus, asked, "Would you like something to drink, sir?" Marcus, polite but puzzled, replied, "I'll have a sparkling water, please." The attendant gives a half smile and walks away, but not before offering the person beside Marcus a more enthusiastic greeting. Marcus glances around, noting the disparity in treatment. Another passenger receives an immediate offer of champagne. Marcus receives his water several minutes later, no apology, no smile. For many, a first-class ticket guarantees comfort, luxury, respect. But for Marcus, it's just another seat, because the biases we face on the ground don't disappear at 30,000 feet above. For many also, flying is a chance to unwind, to escape for a few hours. But for Marcus, each interaction is a reminder of something deeper. In a place where luxury should reign, even the smallest differences in treatment are hard to miss. The cabin hums with the low buzz of conversations and the gentle whir of the plane's engines. Marcus is seated next to an older passenger, a well-dressed white man in his 60s. A warm, polite smile graces Marcus's face as he settles into his seat. As the plane takes off, Marcus is now settled into his seat. He's flipping through his aviation notebook, making notes about future projects. The tension builds as more microaggressions are shown, flight attendants checking on others frequently but ignoring Marcus, side glances from passengers. As Marcus continues to make his notes, there comes some deep thinking in between with reflective pauses. Marcus feels the weight of their assumptions about him. The conversation between Marcus and an older passenger seated beside him unfolds. At first, it's polite small talk, but gradually, the passenger begins asking loaded questions. The older passenger, looking over, he said, "So, what brings you to first class?" "Business, I'm guessing?" Marcus replied with a smile, "You could say that. I work in aviation." The older passenger raises an eyebrow, surprise evident on his face. He exclaimed, "Oh, you mean like a steward or something?" Marcus's smile falters slightly, but he quickly recovers, his tone measured. "Actually, I'm a flight operations manager. I handle a lot of the logistics behind flight scheduling and safety," Marcus replied. The older passenger leans back, assessing Marcus with a hint of skepticism. "Interesting. But how did you get into that? I mean, it must be quite competitive," he muttered. Marcus nodded in confirmation to show that he heard what the older passenger had just muttered, feeling the weight of the question but trying to remain composed. Marcus then responded, "I studied aviation management in college and worked my way up from the ground crew. It's been a lot of hard work, but I love what I do." The older passenger seems to ponder this for a moment, then continues with an air of condescension. "That's impressive," he said, "but I've heard it's a tough industry. I've seen some reports about how hard it is for people of color in aviation. Must be a challenge for you, huh?" These micro-exchanges continued, with tension building each time Marcus is subtly disrespected, even as he tries to remain composed. His knowledge is questioned repeatedly, with each dialogue revealing the systemic bias he faces. Marcus clenches his jaw slightly but maintains his composure, the tension in his chest rising. He replied, Challenging. It can be, but I believe in hard work and perseverance. The industry is changing, albeit slowly." The older passenger chuckles lightly, the sound grating on Marcus's nerves. "Well, good luck with that. I mean, you have to admit, It's not what you'd expect to see in a first-class cabin, right? Marcus feels a knot in his stomach, the casual disrespect stinging deeper than before. I think everyone deserves a seat in first class if they can afford it, Marcus said firmly. The older passenger's eyes narrow slightly, misinterpreting Marcus's confidence as arrogance. Sure, but it's just that the higher-ups usually have certain expectations. You know how it goes. Marcus swallows hard, the conversation morphing into a tightrope walk. His heart races, but he keeps his voice steady and said, "Sincerely, expectations can change. People are starting to recognize talent over background." The older passenger smirks, taking another sip from his drink, and continued, "Right, but I wonder how long it will take for them to really see that. Are you sure you're up for the challenge?" Marcus takes a deep breath, the weight of systemic bias pressing heavily on his shoulders, and said softly, "I am. I believe in what I bring to the table, and I'm not going to let anyone's bias dictate my worth." The older passenger, sensing the shift in Marcus's demeanor, leans back in his seat, visibly unsettled. "Well, good luck to you then. I hope you can prove them wrong." Marcus nods, feeling a sense of empowerment amid the discomfort. Marcus, smiling genuinely, responded, "Thank you. We all have our battles, don't we?" The older passenger nods stiffly, the conversation now trailing off into an awkward silence. Marcus gazes out the window, the clouds parting below him, representing his hope for change. The hum of the airplane becomes a comforting backdrop as he steels himself for the journey ahead. "By the way, my name is Marcus Blake." Marcus stretched out his arm towards him. The older passenger responded to Marcus's gesture and said, "I am George Clark," while shaking hands with him. "Nice to meet you," he said. The lights are dimmed, passengers relax, some dozing off. Marcus tries to adjust his seat, but it seems to be malfunctioning. He presses the call button. Moments like these should be simple. A seat malfunction? Press the button, problem solved. But for Marcus, even this small request for assistance will come with a sting of injustice. The flight attendant appears, slightly irritated. Sighing, she asked, "What seems to be the issue?" Marcus, gesturing, "My seat isn't reclining properly," he answered. The flight attendant glances around, seeing others resting comfortably. With a hint of doubt, "Are you sure you're using it correctly?" she asked. Marcus, calm but clearly annoyed, "Yes, I've tried. It's not responding." She fiddles with the seat controls briefly, mutters something under her breath, and finally the seat reclines. Coldly, she said, "There you go." She walks away without offering an apology. Marcus, now reclined, glances around again and sighs. He looks out of the window, frustration simmering. Even in the skies, Marcus finds himself in a world where his worth is questioned at every turn. But soon, this flight is about to take a turn that no one expects. The flight is now in full swing. Marcus continues reading his book on aviation engineering, highlighting notes and sketching. Suddenly, the plane jolts slightly. There's a murmur among the passengers. Flight captain announces, over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered some turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts." The seatbelt sign is now turned on. In about 45 minutes into the flight, plane turbulence begins. The turbulence rattled the plane, a sharp jolt that sent drinks spilling. But turbulence was not the only disturbance on this flight. For Marcus, the whole experience had already been one of unseen turbulence. As the turbulence worsens, passengers begin to worry. The camera shows Marcus watching the flight crew struggle. He recognizes the signs of something deeper, a mechanical issue. The emergency intensifies over the next 15 minutes as passengers panic. Marcus said to himself, "This isn't just turbulence." He presses the call button, but the flight attendant brushes him, as if to say, "This is not the time." Kim now responding to Mr. Marcus, "Please, stay seated, sir." Marcus replied saying, "I'm an aviation engineer. You have a bigger problem than turbulence." Kim, in disbelief, raised her voice. "Sir, remain calm. We're handling it." Even in moments of crisis, assumptions held firm. Marcus's expertise was ignored, his offer to help pushed aside. But the truth can only stay hidden for so long. Another flight attendant, named Judy, who had noticed all that has been going on in the flight, how Mr. Marcus has been treated, and ignored even when he offered to help, went to the captain and suggested to him to get some help from Mr. Marcus, who has offered to help. After prolonged turbulence that went on for another 15 minutes, and chaos among the crew members, Marcus's offer to help is finally accepted when the captain becomes desperate. "I am Marcus Blake, a senior aviation engineer," he said to the captain as he showed him an ID. The captain responded, "I am Captain Mark Dean." Marcus is escorted to the cockpit. His calm demeanor contrasts with the panic around him. This moment, Marcus begins with explaining the technical issue, gradually winning the captain's respect as he provides life-saving instructions. Captain Dean, a bit relieved, said, "You're right. We've lost control of the rudder system. Can you help us?" Marcus, nodding his head, "I can guide you through it." As the story unfolds and Marcus takes control during the plane's emergency, the flight crew's perception of him dramatically shifts. Initially, they treat him dismissively, assuming he doesn't belong in first class and questioning his competence when he offers help. However, as the situation worsens and Marcus calmly provides expert guidance, their attitude changes from skepticism to reliance and respect. For 20 minutes, Marcus is seen troubleshooting the issue, with conviction and confidence, showing his deep knowledge of the plane's systems. Passengers are still unaware of his involvement, but the crew is now fully reliant on him. As Marcus guides the crew through an emergency landing, the tension begins to reduce gradually. The cockpit crew now trusts Marcus entirely. The dramatic descent lasts 30 minutes, stretching out with detailed instructions and close-up shots of the plane's systems malfunctioning. The passengers brace for impact, and Marcus's calm instructions save the day. The plane landed safely at the airport closest to them at the time. By the time the plane lands safely, the crew is deeply grateful, recognizing him as the hero who saved the flight and challenging their previous biases. When the plane landed safely, there's a moment of stunned silence in the cabin. Most passengers, still unaware of Marcus's heroism, cheer the crew. The passengers' reactions shift significantly throughout the story. Initially, they either ignore Marcus or view him with subtle suspicion, assuming he's out of place in first class. During the flight emergency, while they remain unaware of his role in resolving the crisis, they grow increasingly anxious. After the plane lands safely, they cheer for the crew, not knowing Marcus is the one who saved them. The few who learn of his involvement, however, are surprised and start viewing him with admiration, their prior assumptions shattered. After disembarking, Marcus walks through the airport. The flight attendant, Kim, now fully aware of his identity as a top aviation expert, approached him with newfound respect. Kim, in a humbled tone, said, "Thank you, Mr. Marcus, for everything." Marcus nods but says little. He gathers his things and walks away. Some members of the first-class passengers who knew when Marcus was escorted to the cockpit, including Mr. George Clark, stare with disbelief, while some point at him as he walks through the airport. Passengers who once judged him now regard him with admiration. He is no longer invisible. His walks through the airport are not of arrogance anymore, as previously assumed, but with quiet dignity. Though the flight attendants and crew now recognize his expertise and offer sincere gratitude, Marcus says little, letting his actions speak for themselves. The passengers, many of whom had previously judged him, now look at him with admiration, unaware of how he saved them. This reflects on how assumptions were shattered by Marcus's calm competence, highlighting that true worth transcends appearances. In the end, it wasn't Marcus who needed saving, it was everyone's assumptions. He flew first class, not just in ticket, but in skill, knowledge, and grace. The turbulence that mattered wasn't in the air, but in the hearts and minds of those who couldn't see beyond the surface. Throughout the flight's duration, Marcus experiences a range of emotions. At first, he feels slight frustration and disappointment as he's repeatedly treated with subtle disrespect and microaggressions by the flight crew and passengers. Despite his outward calm, he's aware of the unfairness but remains composed. During the emergency, Marcus's emotions shift to focus and determination, driven by his expertise and desire to help. By the end, although the crew's attitudes change, Marcus feels a quiet sense of validation, but also reflects on how deeply ingrained these biases are, even in moments of crisis. Judy approached Mr. Marcus as she found him sitting in the airport lounge. "Sir," she said, "the simple but strong message from all of this that has happened is that assumptions and biases, no matter how subtle, can cloud judgment in everyday interactions." Marcus was waiting for the next instructions or announcement from the airline. Judy expressed her gratitude to Marcus for saving her life and that of hundreds of passengers. Once they learned about Marcus's role in saving the flight, some passengers came around to thank him after the emergency landing. A few also approached him to express their regret for having judged him based on superficial assumptions. They acknowledged their biases and the mistaken beliefs they held about him. These apologies serve as a moment of reflection for both Marcus and the passengers, emphasizing the story's core message about the need for awareness and understanding in overcoming prejudice. Marcus's journey reveals that true worth, knowledge, and expertise transcend external appearances. The story emphasizes that people's preconceived notions often lead to unfair treatment, but in moments of crisis, those biases are stripped away, revealing the truth. It is a reminder that we must look beyond surface-level assumptions and treat everyone with respect, recognizing their full potential. After Marcus walks away from the airport's lounge, the crew and a few passengers reflect on their biases and assumptions. The flight attendants discuss how their perception of Marcus was influenced by stereotypes, realizing they had misjudged him. Some passengers overhear and begin questioning their own prejudices. Marcus, meanwhile, remains introspective. Though he's satisfied with helping, he's aware that societal biases won't change overnight. The final moments leave the audience with a challenge to reflect on their own unconscious biases and strive for a world where everyone is treated with respect. Marcus's backstory is rich with experience and quiet perseverance. He's a highly skilled aviation engineer, having worked in the industry for years. Despite his expertise and significant contributions, Marcus has consistently faced racial bias and discrimination, both in his professional and personal life. Raised by parents who instilled in him a strong sense of dignity and determination, Marcus has always maintained calm and grace, even when unfairly judged. His passion for aviation began in his youth, and throughout his career, he's navigated not just aircrafts, but also the prejudices that come with being a black man in a predominantly white field. This background explains why Marcus remains composed throughout the flight, even as he faces microaggressions. He's been here before, and he knows that proving his worth comes through action, not confrontation. His backstory reflects resilience, deep knowledge, and an understanding that changing minds often happens in moments of crisis. The passengers and crew's minds change when they witness Marcus's expertise and calm handling of the flight emergency. At first, their biases lead them to dismiss him as out of place in first class, but as the situation grows dire and Marcus steps up to resolve the crisis, their assumptions are challenged. His detailed knowledge of aviation and ability to guide the crew during the emergency forces them to see him not through the lens of race or assumptions, but as a skilled, capable professional who saves the day. Marcus is invited by the head captain, Captain Mark Dean, to a brief meeting with the crew as they make plans to get passengers to their various destinations. Captain Dean begins, "On behalf of myself, crew members, and the airline management, we apologize for everything that happened and thank you immensely for your expertise," he said. As the captain continued, the crew clapped and cheered on Mr. Marcus. Once they recognized his expertise and contributions during the crisis, the flight attendants and the captain expressed their gratitude and regret for their initial dismissive behavior. They acknowledge how their biases clouded their judgment and appreciate Marcus for his professionalism and calm demeanor in a critical moment. These apologies reinforce the theme of personal growth and the importance of recognizing and overcoming preconceived notions. Finally, the main takeaway from this true life story is that assumptions based on race can lead to unfair treatment and missed opportunities to recognize true talent and expertise. The story emphasizes the importance of self-reflection and growth in overcoming biases, showing that individuals can change their perspectives when faced with evidence that challenges their preconceived notions. It highlights the necessity of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their appearance, and the transformative power of shared experiences, especially in moments of crisis.